Welcome back to the live stage at New York Comic Con 2019. It is day 2. How's everybody doing? You guys got some energy out there? All right. My name's Adam Swiderski. I am the editor-in-chief of Sci-Fi Wire, and I am joined by my friend.
Hi, I'm Karama, aka The Blurred Girl, contributing editor of Sci-Fi Wire. How are you?
I am good. And we are joined by two people who really, in the world of comics, need no introduction.
Legends.
But I'm going to do it anyway. The team behind what is quite possibly my favorite graphic novel ever, Y: The Last Man.
It is.
Brian K. Vaughan, Pia Guerra. And we're here to talk about Y:
Ah, I see what you did
The
there.
Last Man.
I see what you did there.
You see what I did there? Yeah.
It's going to be just
So-
like a podcast, guys.
11 years later now. Can you guys believe how long it's been since it was the end?
Yeah, and 18 years since I think we first
Since the
pitched
start,
it, so
yeah.
it's bizarre.
Wow.
So, was there an actual trigger for the origin and the idea? Was this something you'd been kicking around for a while, Brian, or was there a moment where you were like, hey, light bulb, all the men die?
I know. I knew I wanted to write a book about gender, and I guess I'd just been through a bad breakup, and we've told so many different origin stories this weekend. I really don't remember anymore what is fact and what is fiction.
It's like the plague. It's like you don't know. There's a million stories for why it happened. But
That is very well said, yes. But it didn't become what it was until I met Pia. And then I think it really evolved from my original idea after I met her.
So, Pia, when you first read the proposal for this, what was your reaction?
I loved it. I just wanted to get it going and get started right away. It just had this great idea. Like it had these concepts that were kind of hard sci-fi. It talks about gender, but it was couched in a story that was really just about a guy trying to get to his girl. And it had so much heart. And this is great. Can't wait. Let's go.
There's every artist working on like a long-running series talks about how their art changes over time because there's so many volumes and so
Yes.
many. So, how was your artistic journey on this? Did you feel like halfway through I want to change what York looks like, or?
No, I think it was just more trying to make them look right at all. I mean, when I started off, I was not a very strong artist. I thought I was like, you're young, you're very confident. But as I was going along, I was like, oh yeah, I need a lot of improvement. And I learned, and looking from the first issues to the last, it's such a huge difference in just how I was able to get things across. And it was a giant learning curve for everything. And so I'm really, really proud of what I've figured out during the way, along the journey.
What was kind of the aha moment for the collaboration? Was there a conversation or an exchange of ideas or anything that made it feel like, wow, this is the team that's going to make this thing go?
Well, I think from the very beginning, the moment I saw Pia send a page of Yorick hanging upside down in his straitjacket, I was like, this is the artist I've wanted to work with my whole life. And her performances were so great, and her acting was so good. But I think the thing we always talk about is I think we really clicked as a pair during this storyline called Safe Word, where Pia called one day and she said if Yorick is a master of escape, a funny villain for him would be a mistress of bondage. And I was like, that is hilarious and brilliant.
But I also mentioned that there was sense to it because he's obviously up to this point he's really suicidal seeming. So maybe we'd turn this into a cathartic moment and make it into something that works. Like it's not just a kind of a funny ha-ha gag. It can go deeper than that too. And you just ran with it. It was amazing how it was.
So yeah, I think before that we were sort of on parallel tracks working well, but it was really at that point in the series that we realized, we're sort of more than the sum of our parts when we work together. And that's for me just a real high point in my whole career.
And it was probably the only time I've ever opened a script and saw, this page is 17 panels, and I was overjoyed. I've never been to have that since.
So, what is Brian like to work with as a writer and collaborator? Is it? I mean, no, because that's to say that you got 17 panels and you're overjoyed. But was that a typical thing, or did he throw things at you that kind of were curveballs?
No, I mean, up until then, I've worked with a lot of different writers. Some are really new and some who are experienced. But for some reason, we really clicked. I would read what he wrote, and it didn't need a lot of explanation. It was like, oh, I know exactly what you're looking for. I think it was just we had the same language, as maybe it was a visual thing, maybe it was a television thing, but we had similar interests, so it's like I was able to see exactly what he wanted. It was just clear as day. It's not always that way when you're working with a writer. Sometimes there's always clashes, or it's just you're never connecting completely, but with this one, it was great. Yeah.
Did that change over time? Like, did you in the beginning give very detailed scripts, and then now it's like a text message?
Yes, absolutely.
It's so shameful to see my scripts by the very end where it just like close on Yorick, pull out for a shot of 355 because I knew exactly what I would get. So yeah, my first script was probably 40 pages long, and by the end it just had a postcard I could have written her. So we had a real shorthand by the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the last one was about 22 pages. Yeah, so really shrunk down. We just really knew how to work with each other by then.
That's great. Let's talk about the character of Yorick. I listened to an interview that you guys did on a podcast where you talked about some of the reactions to the character surprising you at the time, in terms of seeing Yorick as a bit of a jerk at the beginning, or callow, I would say, a callow youth.
He was a jerk.
Well, you know, he's got some, like most of us, he has some jerkish tendencies.
No, but he had a journey. He
Yeah,
had a
well, that's what I'm
journey.
saying. And you said at the time in this interview, which I think happened near the end of the run of the book, that surprised you. Looking back on the character now, with as much distance as we have, has your perspective on him changed?
I mean, for sure. When I started writing the book, I was in my early 20s, and when I came up with the idea, I was the same age as Yorick, and I put a lot of myself into him, and I thought he was a pretty great guy. And I remember Karen Berger, the editor-in-chief of Vertigo, read the first script, and she's like, I love it. You so rarely get to see a character who's just such kind of a dick. And I was like, uh-oh. This is, I realized this book is
I'm
going to be...
just saying.
Yeah, no, you were not wrong. But I think the book was very much about me growing up at the same time as Yorick. So, but I look back on him now with fondness. You know, he's definitely a dick, and he's a kind of a dummy. But I think he has a good heart, and he took care of that monkey. That's not nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ampersand is everything.
Indeed.
Now that it's resonated with so many people, including Karen, what's the response like? Because, like you said, you were in it. You didn't know how well it was going to be received. What do you think now that it's... I mean, look at all these people who love this book.
It still stuns me every day. I think
Wow.
when we first started, we just had this idea that maybe we'll get 5 issues out of it, and it'll get canceled, and we'll just move on with this experience. And the fact that it just kept going every day of the book, it was just like, wow, it's still going. I'm so happy. And even now, you see people always coming up to the table, and it's still hard to believe. It's harder for me to really... I'm still registering what's going on, so it's weird to me, but it's cool.
One of the things that struck me about the book is that how many people who aren't typically comics readers tended to get into it. When did you realize that it was kind of expanding those boundaries for people? Was there a moment when you're like, wow, this is, people who don't normally read my superhero work or whatever are embracing this?
Yeah, I think probably the first year of the book, we would have men come up at conventions, and they would drag their girlfriend along and say, this is the first book that she has ever read. And then somewhere around year 3, we had women coming up and saying, I finally got my boyfriend into comics, and it was really nice. I always heard Neil Gaiman said that Sandman traveled like a venereal disease through relationships. So it's like one person would give it, they would break up and pass it along to the next person. So I just thank you to everyone out there who has dumped or been dumped and had to buy Y again for the next person in your life. It's kept the book alive for generations now.
Yeah. I mean, that's very much hold my beer moment. Sandman is a venereal disease. Check this out. But one of the things I wanted to get into with the book is how much work you did to make it as true to life, or to bring that verisimilitude to it, in terms of the design and the storytelling. I mean, there must have been a ton of research that went into this thing.
Absolutely, yeah. I have stacks and stacks of just photocopies, printouts of Google image searches, and lots of detail. And I don't even know if all of it even comes through, but yeah, I just put way too much reference into this thing, but that's how I work. I like to.
Yeah, what was your favorite thing that you're like, ooh, now I know how to draw this that you didn't know before?
What was my favorite which?
Your favorite, I guess your favorite thing that when you were researching, you're like, ooh, now I know how to draw what this class submarine looks like or something like that. Was
I
there?
mean, guns are a lot easier to draw now. Yeah, it's. I think I just have a process now where I know where to find images really fast, and it's all part of the process now. So instead of where before it was like, when we started this, there was no actual Google image search. It was just Google and also National Geographics. And because even then, the internet didn't have as many images to refer from as they do now. So, you know, you had to like scramble everywhere to find stuff. And now it's so much easier. And that's what's changed.
Actually, same question. Was it for Brian? Was there scientific research that went into a lot of it? Because, I mean, just to think, okay, so if there are no male animals, they can't reproduce, which means we might not be able to eat. So there's different diseases and all of that stuff. It felt
the rabbit holes that you can go down with that, I would imagine, are pretty deep.
And I mean, picking a character like Dr. Mann as part of the cast, or the preeminent bioengineer on the planet, and I realized I'm a film school student. I don't know any of this. It was great fun, and I enjoyed all the research, but by the time Y was over, it's like, my next book is just going to be in a crazy make-up fantasy universe where I don't have to read any more books.
Yeah, you make all the rules at that point.
Exactly. So Saga, I think, was born out of, I have read enough books now for one lifetime.
Sweet. Did you have one?
No, I was actually going to bring up Saga.
Sure.
I'm like, so therefore, that's why Saga exists, and how, you know,
There are
that
no
universe
rules in
could be-
that one. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely no rules.
Were there moments, I guess, you guys said you worked together creatively, were there moments where there was conflict or where there was rub between the creative vision and how you wanted to render things? I mean, I assume that happens in any long-term creative collaboration.
I think it was always pretty smooth.
Really?
I mean,
pretty
unless
rare.
he hates me behind my back. I don't know.
No, I do remember I forget where we were at some convention or something, but we were talking about the final episode, and not to spoil anything for Bill, but I was talking about a particular character's demise, and I was like, well, it's sort of matter of fact about this is going to happen, and I saw Pia just start weeping at the table, and everyone was looking around at this restaurant like, what terrible thing have I said to this poor woman?
Yeah, we looked like we were just having a really awful breakup, and we were just having a business meeting here about what the next scripts are going to look like. And I was really jet lagged, just to be fair. So when I'm really tired, my emotions go right to the surface. But I heard this, and yeah, I just started bawling, and it was and I just like, we got to find a way. Is there another way? Can we do something to not have this happen?
Okay,
And,
so it wasn't just us. That makes me feel better. It wasn't just us.
I was going to say, I imagine that's probably, if not the moment in the comic that got the biggest fan, or the most fan reaction, one of, for sure, I would imagine, yes?
Yeah, no, I hear about it all the time. And it's very strange now to have people wait in line to meet you just to say, you made me cry. And I don't know how to respond to that, but I'm
So you just go,
sorry, and thank you. Yes.
Yeah, after the year or two after it ended, it was just nonstop at cons. People come to the table, and they would just start crying, like in front, and like there was hugs, and there was, you know, sharing stories about their pets, and like what, and it was like for a while, I was like, I don't know if I should keep coming to these cons. This is very emotionally overwhelming, but yeah, it was incredible, the response.
What's the strangest fan thing that's happened besides? I mean, did somebody bring a monkey? Like, has anybody? Oh God, somebody brought a monkey.
Tattoos.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But then they show you where they are.
Yeah, but we're talking like full back tattoos and really like graphic tattoos. Like there was one scene from Yorick's nightmare. There's a dream Beth's nightmare, where it's Yorick bleeding out of his eyes in this dream, and a guy got a full one on his shoulder of that.
Of the eye bleed. Okay.
Yes.
Wow.
And he showed it to me. I'm like, why would you do that? I mean, it's beautiful, but why would you do that? And but there's also covers. There was the ampersand monkey and the astronaut, the skull.
The weirdest thing I had recently is two parents brought up their 12-year-old son and said, we want to introduce you to Yorick. And they had named their son Yorick, and I said, nice to meet you, this is amazing. And he just glared at me, and he's like, kids call me urine. And I was like, I feel terrible, I'm sorry, but Yeah, so...
Well, the
Smart.
interesting thing is that he's blaming you, not Shakespeare.
Totally,
For
right?
that.
I'm like, it's
That's-
not
yeah.
my fault, kid. I didn't make up this name. It's, your parents are weirdos. I don't know, but it's also very flattering.
So, looking back now, a lot has changed in the conversation around gender and gender politics and gender roles in the past decade. A lot is the same. Obviously, we still have a lot of the same issues. And this is kind of a loaded question, but if you were to approach this now, given some of the things that have gone on over the past decade in our world, would you approach it differently? Are there different things that you would do when it comes to the story?
Sure. I mean, completely. I think Why is such a story about post 9/11 America, too. I think it's really a document of its time. But it's also, I think, you know, today, if you said I'm going to do a story about all of the men dying, it suddenly feels a little less post-apocalyptic and more kind of fantasy escapist. Like, maybe things would be a little bit better if all the guys suddenly died. So, yeah.
There was a great term I read in an article today called hope punk. It's like the opposite of grimdark. It's called hope punk. And the idea of doing these kind of dystopian kind of stories, but they all have a positive thing like, yes, these are horrible things are happening, but we're all working towards making it better. It's going to get better. It's like that rebellious attitude. And even if I die, someone will take up my torch. And like, I love that idea. And I realized like, oh, wait, we kind of did that too. Because at the end, I mean, yes, all this stuff happened, but women just kind of pick up and carry on and they're like, yeah, whatever, we're still living our lives. And I was like, oh, that's a really nice, positive way of looking at it. I never really saw that before.
That was one of the things I really appreciated about the book is even before you get to the end, right, where we jump forward in time, you still get to see that society is kind of picking itself back up again, right, and making things work and people are finding connections. Was that, from the beginning, an important thing for you guys to want to convey?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think we always knew that things are going to be really bad at the beginning, but that has nothing to do with women are less capable of running the planet than men. It's just they have to contend with billions of people have suddenly died, and the world has changed completely. But we knew that, yeah, over time, that, I don't think the world would be better or worse. It's just going to be different than it was before.
Was that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think there's also the suggestion that all these disparities that we have now, if we were able to figure out how to fix them, it would get better overall, even, you know, even without any kind of grand depart. It's like, if we fix this, society would be better anyway. And they showed that they made it better when they fixed their disparities. So maybe this is something we need to look at in our own world now.
Yeah, and I mean, it seems like it ties very much into the mood post 9/11, right? Was that informed by it? Because I think a lot of us around that time were like, wow, is the world coming to an end? Especially if you lived in New York City, you know, is what's going to change, and didn't see that light at the end of the tunnel. Was that part of what informed that?
I think it was because we started working on the book just in the weeks right before 9/11, and 9/11 happened. And I guess the biggest change was that the book got funnier. I think because when I was writing about sort of hypothetically this world-shifting terrible disaster, I imagined just this sort of funereal sense and a lot of wailing and gnashing of teeth. And when 9/11 happened and I was living in New York at the time, it was mostly just a lot of drinking and jokes because you realize it is so scary and is so awful that the only way to contend with it is sort of this gallows humor. So I think Yorick became a lot funnier and the book sort of became a bit lighter in touch because we knew that's, I think, how we would have to respond. It's the only way you can keep going.
Well, we can actually talk about the future of the book and adapting it because it's coming to TV. So have you made some of these changes? Have you changed, or I shouldn't say changed, are you aware of a bunch of the changes, I have to watch my phrasing, that are being made to the story so that it is more modern?
Yeah, I mean, yes, 100%. So if you guys haven't heard, Why the Last Man is finally coming to FX in 2020. So it's been a long, strange journey to bring it to life, but yeah, I think we both feel this is the best version that's ever happened. It feels like this is the right time for it. And that, yeah, you're going to see this is definitely Yorick, who is a resident of 2019. And yet, I think the heart of the book, wouldn't you say, it still captures, it still feels like our story. but addressing, I think, the modern world we all live in.
It bounced around a little bit, but the casting stayed the same, right?
Yes, yeah,
Okay,
for sure. It's amazing.
Very worried about that.
No, Barry Keoghan, Diane Lane, the monkey from Friends is.
Wait, is it really the same monkey from Friends?
Yes.
It's literally in the. I thought
Well,
you were joking.
it's one of a pair, actually. When,
Oh.
when Friends was going, they had an older one and they had a junior. And so the junior from that is now the senior here.
Wow. A star of Netflix streaming.
That's what I'm
The
saying.
Monkey from Friends. Yeah, that's amazing.
Ampersand friend.
And I would love to be able to meet her, but the trainers are really protective. So I've heard that when she's on set, like no one else can be on set. So it's
Her trailer is bigger than
Yeah.
everyone else's.
Obviously, yeah.
But yeah, I love that Ampersand is being played by a woman now, or a female monkey
Actually,
at least.
yeah, that's
yes,
true.
so
That's awesome.
we've,
Uh-oh, controversy.
Yeah.
That's good. Whew. Why do you think it was such a long journey to, I mean, you know, this has been kicked around for a while. There was a movie deal that fell through, and I'm sure that was in pre-production. Why has it taken so long for Y to be realized as a live-action incarnation?
Yeah, I think it makes me grateful for comics because I think a lot of fans of the book are really nice and say these are just storyboards. You could just go out and shoot this, but I think a lot of the ideas make people uncomfortable, and it's a deceptively challenging story to get right. And I think comics can really balance that tone where we can do, you know, a hilarious page one moment, and then you do gripping drama and tragedy the next. I think film and television has a little harder time getting that right. So yeah, it's taken a really long time to find the right collaborators and the right home for it. But like I say, I think we finally have.
It's also a perfect time because I think before maybe 6 years ago, we wouldn't have thought we could say half the things that were said. And now, yeah, we need this. We need this adaptation.
I guess thankfully, it feels like it's kind of always been the perfect time for this. I remember when we first sold it to FX years ago, they were like, well, obviously, Hillary will be president by the time this comes out.
I'll
so
tell you, when I
this'll
was
be-
rereading the book, and there was a scene where Dr. Mann's talking about that with Rose, and it was just like, ooh.
Yeah,
No offense to anybody, but I have to say, like, it was just one of those moments where, given everything that's happened over the past couple years, it was a real.
It is
You wanna
for
read that,
as
yeah.
many ways as the world has changed radically since then. There's also at the end of that first issue, we had those sort of all those statistics about here's what's changed, here's how many commercial airline pilots are feeling, and so few of those statistics have changed.
Yeah.
So in a lot of ways, we are living in the same world. It is still the same patriarchy, and so you know, sadly, I think our story is just as relevant as ever.
Yeah.
One of the things that strikes me about Y is that it is a story about a world almost entirely populated by women that still kind of centers a male character. What was the impetus behind that aspect of it?
Yeah, I guess I knew that at least at the time it was certainly a really male-dominated audience, and I knew that a lot of them would be reading, and I'd sort of had, you know, this creepy fantasy as a kid that like, oh, you know, my babysitter will finally fall in love with me if only every other man on the planet suddenly drops dead. And like talking to other creepy kids, like I had that same fantasy. I was like, this is terrible. What is wrong with us?
I am so happy you decided to make comics.
Yeah, and so it was like realizing that this will be, you know, a story that a lot of men will read, and I wanted to sort of subvert this horrible fantasy and sort of, you know, have it be a gateway for them to hopefully tell, you know, a story about gender that would be a story for everyone. But yeah, I don't know. How do you feel about it? As did you ever feel like we should just kill off Yorick in like issue 3 and then let's just get on with it?
No, I just wanted to get to his girlfriend and see where that was going and get to the really good breakup part. So yeah.
I mean, that's the ultimate fuel for any good art, is that horrible breakup, right? That has to be.
Actually, if Yorick is patterned off of you and close to you, who's 355?
I'd say it's my wife very much.
Good
Yeah,
answer.
so I think it was, yeah, and she and I started out as friends, and I think sort of the same journey that Yorick had all along, which is this incredible person has been right next to you all along, and you're sort of chasing this phantom for what you think is a good relationship. but a relationship, a good one isn't one that makes you feel better, it's one that makes you better. And so it's fun to get to see 355 sort of making Yorick a better person, as my wife was doing very much the same thing.
I think that theme is also in Saga.
For sure. Yeah, I just keep stealing from my wife and putting it into comics, so yeah.
See, we're still running everything.
I know. Yeah.
It's true. So when it came to casting the show, I mean, obviously you guys spent a ton of time with these characters, and I know the decisions obviously weren't all yours, but what were the things, like for Yorick, what was the thing you're like, an actor has to have this to really bring Yorick to life?
I guess I was just thinking he can't be too chiseled and too pretty. I drew him that
Yeah.
way for simplicity's sake, and it's just a weird mind trick when you're drawing. If you keep the lines simple, it makes it easier for the reader to put him in that place, and kind of like, it's a weird psychological thing that happens. But when I was always hoping that when they got to actually casting him, that he'd just be interesting, that he'd be a little different, maybe a little weird or odd, or not.
But you wanted to look like a regular guy.
Yeah, I didn't want a CW, perfectly chiseled guy on there. I just wanted someone who's interesting, and you want to just. Yeah, I think when you're watching television, the more interesting the face, that what brings you in. Whereas in comics, it's a completely different mindset. So that's just my psychological side of it.
Yeah, no, Yorick is definitely the main character, but he is not the hero of the story. He's the damsel in distress. And I think I just wanted someone who was comfortable playing that, and I think we definitely have that.
How about
Range,
355?
someone who
Oh, I'm
has
sorry.
range, and someone who has range, too. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about 355, obviously, if it's modeled on your wife, you must have had some investment in how that's going to be realized.
Yes. Yeah, no, I think, again, it's, I think it's easy to sort of just say that a strong female character, but you want someone who's also a good foil for Yorick, and someone that you're rooting for, and someone who can just sort of take the piss and put Yorick in his place. And they just have such incredible chemistry. The two of them are really a lot of fun to watch together.
Are there any nerves when it comes to seeing your creation finally come to life? Is there anything that you're like, oh God, I hope they really nail this? Or is it just excitement at this point?
No, it's really, for me, like, I love our comic, and I'm so grateful that our comic is still out there. And I think any show or movie is just going to bring more people to the comic. So, no, I think with the creators, we've just given them so much freedom. I said, please just make this your own. And it's more important to me that it's a great TV show than a faithful TV show.
Yeah.
And thankfully, I think it's both. So we're just very, very lucky.
Great. Well, that is our time. Thank you
you.
so much
Thank
for
you.
joining
Thank
us.
you so much.
Brian K. Vaughan, Pia Guerra, Why the Last Man. If you've never read it, you absolutely should. Coming up next on this stage, Diamond Selects will be doing their toy previews, so stick around.